When it comes to the Stellar Blade theme songs of its bosses, we are given a plethora of musical types and genres to infect our eardrums while slashing through the pulp of the various Elite and Alpha Naytibas. As Stellar Blade's bosses are encountered by the Angel of the 7th Airborne Squadron, the 2024 Game Awards nominated soundtrack gives us a slew of incredible and unique songs. Here are just a few. The longing female vocals when fighting Tachy. The heavy metal of Belial. The Latin symphonics echoed during our fight against the Elder. And of course, one of the community's most beloved songs of the entire soundtrack that includes lyrics that were part of a completely made-up language by Shift Up, sung by female vocals laced atop the futuristic techno-progressive track that so perfectly complement Raven as we battle her outside of the nest. But it's Pernelle's Democrawler that is arguably the most important boss encounter song on the entire soundtrack. Democrawler sits atop unique musical pillars of its own. Sure, Democrawler packs an auditory punch of adrenaline that spawns in our ears as soon as Eve jumps down to the core's main floor. But the opera singer Pernelle's aria does something no other song does in the game, as it reveals an incredible amount of story through lyrics of the operatic singer. Pernelle's song harmoniously matches the setting and narrative of the entire history of the orbit elevator, what came before in the final war, and now 72 plus years later, with Eve now present here. Of course, Pernelle's song is an outlier of the game's soundtrack in terms of musical genre. Dark, operatic, and tragic are what immediately register as Eve engages the Democrawler, but it's Pernelle's lyrics that truly set this song apart. Within the orbit elevator, through the boss battle with Belial and the Karakuri, we start to learn that Naytiba are not just mindless husks. They have thought, primarily influenced by their hostile instincts to kill humans. I'll get more into this in a moment, but they can also be motivated by their consuming thoughts at the moment of their infection. That is, the thoughts the Androidos have as their initial contact with Naytiba occurs seems to be locked in their psyche and consume their being, influencing how they function after turning. The opera singer Pernelle tells this story through her lyrics. She channels and becomes the Democrawler and the greater Demogorgon itself. Her lyrics tell the story as if she is the Elite and Greater Alpha Naytiba. Through her song lyrics, she is the monstrosity sitting atop the orbit elevator. In opera, a solo song sung by a performer is called an aria. Arias often show the emotional core of the opera's narrative. The lyrics of Pernelle's aria here in Stellar Blade hear her sing the story of the ending moments of the final war, Andro-Eidos humanity's evacuation up the orbit elevator, and ultimate denial of escape from a pursuing enemy. The enemy is the Naytiba, and Mothersphere was the one to deny their escape. The inevitability of humanity's defeat at the hands of a more powerful and evolutionary capable Naytiba force, paired with the subsequent 72 plus years of biomaterial and Naytiba buildup within the orbit elevator that now pursues its revenge towards Mothersphere within the colony, is sung operatically in Pernelle's haunting lyrics. No other boss fight song comes close in terms of narrative weight. Through Pernelle's Democrawler, we are able to understand some of the game's more rich moments in history, particularly how the final war ended and what occurred within the orbit elevator in the 72+ years after. This is Stellar Blade's calamity atop the orbit elevator, the Elite Naytiba Democrawler, and Greater Alpha, the Demogorgon. Baseline emotions, understanding Naytiba. The Naytiba mass that is the Democrawler and the greater Demogorgon has one goal in mind. The biomaterials that make up its mass, accumulated from the final war, persist. The greater Demogorgon moves up the orbit elevator in pursuit of accomplishing its goal. Within the Democrawler and Demogorgon is a mix of despair and pain, felt by the Andro-Eidos bodies that comprise part of it, and the instinctual urge to kill Andro-Eidos humans ingrained within the Naytiba that comprise the other part of it. This mix of sorrow, suffering, and hatred within this huge Naytiba mass moves upward towards the light of Mothersphere. It hopes somehow to get into the colony. With Mothersphere's space station as its ultimate destination, it looks upon the colony in an everlasting manner, blinded by the light of the colony and the great Mothersphere within. But what pushes this monstrosity ever upward? Yes, all Naytiba have an inbred urge to kill humans, Andro-Eidos humans that stole the moniker of humanity from them. But what sets the bosses of the orbit elevator apart from those that Eve has encountered prior to traveling to Spire 4 is what they reveal about a Naytiba's base ability to think, feel, and the greater overall tragedy of them. Belial is the first boss Eve encounters that exhibits such a quality to do so. It is filled with rage towards Andro-Eidos humans after it, as a combat drone, was abandoned by them. Combat drones such as the Belial unit most surely had an onboard AI. Perhaps it was as capable as an artificial general intelligence, on the same level as each individual Andro-Eidos human. However, what is more likely is that the Belial combat drones were only a fraction of their human counterparts in terms of their true AI individuality. Either way, Belial's had to have at least some sliver of consciousness. As one, imagine fighting to help humanity, only to be abandoned by them as Mothersphere called the final evacuation to the orbit elevator. These combat drones, the Belial units, most likely were used to fend off the Naytiba aggressors in order to give humanity the chance to escape. Belials would have looked on as the Andro-Eidos humans were called to evacuate while they were left here, to be used as fodder as they were inevitably consumed by the pursuing Naytiba masses. As this Belial combat drone was contaminated, it held on to that feeling of abandonment, and over the 72+ years since the end of the final war, up until Eve came upon it, its feelings have festered and an evolved rage now persists within it. This Belial stalks the angel that represents those who deserted it, hoping to use its rage to enact retribution. Further up the orbit elevator, the Karakuri Naytiba gives us our first understanding that several Naytiba and biological substances can amass into greater, more intelligent, and formidable enemies our heroine must overcome.
The Naytiba I defeated just now used a human as a host. No, that's not quite right. It'd be more accurate to say humans.
Seriously? I never knew they could combine with multiple people. Maybe that's why it felt like it was more intelligent than usual. Do you think more of those things are waiting for us up there?
These bosses, and even Raven, the unlisted Naytiba, as well as the Democrawler and Demogorgon, inform us of Naytiba's ability to latch onto a base thought or instinct and amplify it to the nth degree. This is most likely due to Raphael Marx and the team of scientists within the Levoirs programming in the instinct to kill the Andro-Eidos humans, what Rafi refers to as the machines, when the quarantine failure occurs and it becomes contaminated with Naytiba. Killing is such a baseline behavior. Humans and our ancestors, Neanderthals, have killed for generations upon generations. Survival of the fittest. It is one of our oldest human behaviors, to kill one another. And based on the behavior of Stellar Blade's more formidable Naytiba forms, Belial, Raven, the Demogorgon, it seems that it uses the ability to latch onto other baseline human emotions and amplify them, mixing with the other baseline emotion of killing, in order to help that Naytiba achieve its ultimate goal, death of the machines, death of the Andro-Eidos. This is why we see Belial fueled with rage, Raven fueled by her jealousy and contempt for Eve, and now here with the Demogorgon, it fueled by resentment of those that made it to the colony. Naytiba behavior is the mix of the urge to kill machines and Andro-Eidos and whatever other dangerous baseline emotions are present during the moments of its contamination. And as Pernelle's beautifully horrific and gothic operatic song tells, the Andro-Eidos humans that make up the Demogorgon were filled with despair, pain, and sorrow at the ending moments of the final war. Let's take a look at where these emotions came from by going back to a time before what occurred in the orbit elevator 72+ years ago, before the final war. Mothersphere's Utopia. Living as one of Mothersphere's new humans on Earth after her reclassification of humankind was like living in a utopian society. Humans were made to believe their digital god, Mothersphere, through the creation of and implementation of the body cell and body frames, had solved humanity's biggest obstacle, death. Through the propaganda of the Mothersphere doctrine, humans living in her society believed the body cell gave them a tremendous leap forward in terms of their own biological evolution and capabilities, true human and machine singularity, new strength and durability to survive in the depths of the oceans and the harshness of outer space, and most importantly, the ability to live on as getting old and dying of disease were now a thing of the past. These humans did not understand, though, that their utopia was built on a lie, and more importantly, they did not know they were in fact androids, from a completely different lineage from true human beings. They were in fact an android replacement, their body frames a superior hardware when compared to the more fragile and susceptible organic human body that predated their existence on Earth. And finally, these Andro-Eidos, the ones that believed they were human, were completely unaware that they were accomplices to their digital god in committing genocide against their organic predecessors. Through implanting false memories and continued indoctrination and propaganda imposed upon them by Mothersphere, these new humans were made to believe they were and always have been the species they committed genocide against. The horrific true history would therefore stay hidden, and they would not question their machine body parts. Although the genocide of the entire organic human race was such a horrible act that these new humans caused, they would eventually be the species that met an even greater tragedy. With their minds wiped of any knowledge of the organic human species that predated them, they have no awareness that a small surviving group of the organic humans they committed genocide against fled underground, evolved themselves to become more powerful, and would eventually enact revenge against them. Therefore, when these evolved surviving organic humans did attack in a rage of vengeance, the new Andro-Eidos humans were tragically caught off guard. Due to having their minds wiped, they were completely oblivious to who this new enemy was, some theorizing the new enemy must be an alien threat, as they had no domestic or earthly enemies they were aware of. With the true history laid out of how Mothersphere accomplished her ability to replace organic human beings with her android race, the Andro-Eidos, we can view Earth as a playing field where these two species existed during the reign of Mothersphere's Utopia. Andro-Eidos humans lived on Earth's surface, and the small group of surviving humans that became Naytiba persisted underground, biding their time. As an Andro-Eidos human, imagine living in this utopian society, witnessing the sheer horror of Naytiba burrowing up from underground. And worse, these horrific enemies seemed to have an instinctive nature to want to kill those around them, to murder and take out all of humankind, their society and weapons. The once thriving human society that was under Mothersphere's grace was now caught off guard and thrown into a war of attrition, the final war, that slowly ate away at their population and infrastructure. Then imagine the fear of the human society when they realized the enemy that called themselves Naytiba was more than just an opposing force. It was an infestation that was contagious. As they battled the Naytiba, the Andro-Eidos humans would realize their new enemies had limitless evolutionary capabilities that made losing to them on the battlefield an inevitability. But worse, upon their defeat, the human bodies and even combat drones and weapons of human society were absorbed into the collective opposition of the Naytiba. New humanity slowly lost in every battle or skirmish. Then their defeated numbers were used against them, ensuring they would eventually lose the final war, simply from a calculated numbers perspective. In a last-ditch effort to save mankind, Mothersphere called out an evacuation to select members of her race of new humans to retreat to the safety of the colony, the orbital space station created by New Humanity's god years before. Nobody knows why the colony was first constructed, but now with Earth almost completely infested with Naytiba, its existence was looked upon with dire hope as a means to escape and live safely, out of reach of their enemy. During Stellar Blade, we are given insight into the displacement of the Andro-Eidos humans as a result of the ending moments of the final war. Those that were left on Earth and now live in Zion feel as though they were left on a dry, barren wasteland to live out a life abandoned by Mothersphere. And those that made it to the colony, those that surely must live now in a life of posh luxury and comfort, the ones referred to as Heaven's royalty, sit within Mothersphere's grace. These are the humans that were chosen, saved by her. Some believe a contrary idea of Heaven's royalty. Living on the colony under Mothersphere's dominion might actually not be what it is thought out to be as. Due to this line of thinking, both fates of Andro-Eidos humans, those that were abandoned on Earth and those that were selected by Mothersphere to live on the colony, are troubling. But those caught within the orbit elevator, unable to be fully evacuated by Mothersphere to the colony, met a more disturbing fate. To stop the potential contamination of the colony from the pursuing Naytiba presence up the orbit elevator during the evacuation process of her Andro Eidos humans, Mothersphere made the calculated decision to seal off entry from the orbit elevator to the colony. The greater good, the survival of her new humans, was determined, and at a certain point, entrance into the colony ceased. All evacuating humans were trapped within. Their remaining hope became a terrible thing that drove them mad. These humans could see the colony so close, could have perhaps even seen humans within the colony's outer ring through the windows of the orbit elevator. Their hope of escape, to be within the colony, cut off in a cold, calculated manner by Mothersphere. This denial of making it to the colony became something that drove them mad, as they realized it was their God's decision to deny them salvation through the colony. As the contagious Naytiba biomaterials consumed them, rolled over and through them as a red wave of hate, anger, and loathing, it mixed with the Andro Eidos' dying feelings of despair, pain, and grief of not making it into the colony. The biomass that was consumed with the mix of these emotions slowly amassed over the next 72 plus years into what we see atop the orbit elevator as Eve enters the core. The miracle from the depths below. What is revealed within the core is the form of the Democrawler. Not only its physical appearance, but also the understanding that its composition of seemingly hundreds of Andro Eidos humans from the ending evacuating moments of the final war compiled into one greater Elite Naytiba is an amalgamation of tragedy, dread, and sorrow. But this is the only boss encounter of the game where our heroine, Eve, exudes an empathetic nature for the actions she is about to take against it. All other boss encounters have been about Eve accomplishing a mission. They have revealed the soldier-like, forward-moving, inevitable nature she has as an airborne squad member that constantly pursues her goals. Gigas's encounter was about obtaining the first Alpha Core. Eve barreled through the Stalker and Skull Juggernaut in order to push through to the end of Matrix 11. And even the tragedy of fighting her older sister Tachy was met by Eve's understanding that she would have to do so to gain the second Alpha Core. Eve never hesitated to fight Tachy. Eve's companions even recognize this about her throughout the campaign, as they make remarks about Eve's nature, always pushing forward no matter what is presented to her in her uphill battle. Something akin to Sisyphus, like an eternal task of pushing a giant boulder up a never-ending mountain.
Ah, we got it. The hypercell. This is going to do a lot of good. Eve, thank you.
Okay. Then, can you tell me where the Alpha Naytiba is?
Of course. It isn't far. Even in the darkest times, it's always safe to bet on human survival instinct.
So, where do we go?
No time for breaks. Typical Eve.
But now, finally atop the mountain that is the orbit elevator, as Pernelle's lyrics state, the miracle from the depths below, Eve, has traveled to its peak to relinquish the suffering of the Andro Eidos humans that make up the Democrawler and the greater Demogorgon. This is where we see Eve break from how she presented herself during the entirety of all other boss fights, and we see a sympathetic nature to the angel that was not present before. She is the miracle risen from the base of Spire 4, and now redemption for the Andro Eidos we see fall from the ceiling of the orbit elevator's core is nigh. Eve is both appalled and empathetic towards the number of Andro Eidos human souls she sees within the Democrawler.
What have you done to yourself? I see all that pain.
Looking at this boss encounter through this lens allows us to view it as the one boss fight of the game where we are not trying to triumph over a deadly enemy, but instead trying to provide trapped souls salvation. Eve sees them as held within a nightmare, and she plans to set them free.
There's no core.
Eve, behind you!
Transitioning to the Alpha. Stellar Blade does not have boss encounters with multiple stages. There are transitions, such as our boss encounter with Tachy, that takes us from atop the water purifier down below to its depths by the fight's end. But there are never any true multiple-stage boss encounters where Eve fully depletes a boss's health bar, then the health bar is refilled in a subsequent stage. Belial is the only one that comes close, but he is a regenerative boss, so it differs from actual multiple stages, like games such as Black Myth Wukong. Along that game's campaign, we first saw this with the white-clad noble. After his first stage, his health bar refilled to bring us into the encounter's second stage, then further with multiple bosses along the campaign of Game Science's Chinese epic, all the way through to the game's end, where we fought through multiple stages against the shell of the Great Sage. Here in Stellar Blade, the Democrawler and Demogorgon are a version of this that occurs, and the only one of its kind in the game. However, the transition from the Elite Naytiba to the Greater Alpha is not meant to reset the gamer into the next stage of a boss fight from a gameplay perspective, but instead to subvert the gamer's expectations based on what has come before. Up until this point, Eve has been able to obtain alpha cores with general ease, one each from Gigas and Tachy, with Gigas being the largest alpha we have come upon so far. As Eve is flung from the core of the orbit elevator, the true purpose of this transition is revealed. One could argue there are multiple climaxes of Stellar Blade. Working backwards from the game's ending, one would not be wrong to say Eve and Adam's fusion, or Eve's defeat of Raven, are climaxes for Eve along her hero's journey. However, because Eve's climb up the orbit elevator sees her literally ascending through each rising action that escalated through the boss encounters littered throughout Spire 4, the Demogorgon perfectly encapsulates a climax if you view it as the literal peak of the orbit elevator. And this climax for Eve is meant to mirror that of Ezekiel's climax of his vision of God from the Bible. Stellar Blade has clear Christian influences. I've covered a lot of them on my channel in other videos, but the Christian influence seen here as Eve opens her eyes and the greater Demogorgon is revealed draws direct ties to what Ezekiel witnessed in the Bible. In Ezekiel 1, he has a vision of God, flanked by different figures, one being of 4 heads, bronze in color, which I believe is the inspiration of the Skull Juggernaut. The Ophanim, a great figure of wheels within wheels, the clear inspiration for the design of the colony. And the final figure, the Seraphim, known as the Burning Ones, and high amongst the hierarchy of angels in heaven. Like Ezekiel, Eve sees God and the surrounding figures. This high above earth, Eve has a similar vision. She sees the game's representation of the Seraphim, which flanks the colony, Stellar Blade's throne of its god, Mother Sphere. Encircling Earth is the colony, the game's representation of the Ophanim. In low orbit around Earth, the rings are not visible, but in front of Eve now, as she opens her eyes, is the game's representation, of the Seraphim, the Demogorgon. But this being is not angelic or celestial in nature, like its biblical inspiration. The greater biomaterial of the infectious Naytiba has accumulated atop the orbit elevator, ready to extend even further upwards to the colony to enact revenge against Mothersphere. The dread, sorrow, and anger of the Andro-Eidos humanity that comprise it look to vanquish Mother, their ASI god who abandoned them on Earth, and who now is installed within the colony, safe from the incessant Naytiba. And finally, the miracle from the depths below, Eve, arrives to purge them of their cursed existence. But Eve does not give the Demogorgon elation through the deliverance of Mothersphere. Eve is an angel. Retribution and revenge are not part of her core. True, Eve is motivated by vengeance during parts of the story, but she never commits fully to an act of retribution. For what Raven did to Tachy, Eve does seek out the fallen angel, but she chooses not to take Raven's life. Here above Earth, Eve's purpose is not to provide the Demogorgon with the means to obtain vengeance over Mothersphere. This is not the miracle the Demogorgon mass is being offered. Instead, Eve's miracle, the elation and salvation that Pernelle's lyrics sing of, is the Alpha Naytiba's release of suffering. As Eve sends what is thought to be the final burst of energy of her body frame's overcharge through the drone into the Alpha, she gives the thousands, if not millions of souls trapped within freedom. Ad Astra to the stars. That's it for this explanation of the Democrawler and Demogorgon. Let me know down in the comments what you think of these Stellar Blade bosses, or anything else Stellar Blade related. I'll jump down into the comments to keep up the discussion with you all there. Happy 1-year anniversary of Stellar Blade. Have a good one, and may your memories live on forever.